Baltimore had seen gang wars before, but nothing like what happened when G-Tru hit the streets. He wasn't just another Eight Tray Crip. He was the type of leader who made his own rules, moved without warning, and turned on anyone the moment they got in his way. As bodies dropped and alliances fell apart, both the BGF and even his own crew started to realize they weren't up against a typical rival. They were dealing with someone unpredictable, relentless, and dangerously hungry for power. This is the story of how one man sparked a war so chaotic that even the feds had no choice but to step in. So, when people talk about the 8 Tray Gangster Crips in Baltimore, they're talking about a crew that moved with real weight, serious reputation, serious heat, and a whole lot of influence both on the streets and behind the walls. They weren't just some scattered neighborhood clique. They operated like a whole organization, tight-knit and disciplined, with a code they lived and died by. The ETG Crips came from Los Angeles back in the 1970s, right off 83rd Street. That's where the name comes from, and that's the energy that set the tone for everything that came after. As the set grew in LA, different cliques started forming in different parts of the city. Back West ETG in West LA, Nutty North Side ETG up north. And once the movement started spreading, it didn't stop. By the 2000s, ETG was planting roots in different states, and Maryland became one of the biggest hubs. Baltimore was where things really took shape. In neighborhoods like Baltimore Hilton and Lexington Terrace, local members aligned themselves with the LA Back West identity, while up in Frankfurt Sinclair, they connected themselves to the Nutty North Side branch. Even though these were separate areas, the Baltimore cliques stayed locked in with each other, moving like one body. They shared information, worked the same plays, and moved carefully to stay ahead of the police. Their structure was strict, no loose hierarchy, no freelancing. Everybody started at the bottom as a baby gangster. If you showed you were committed, you moved up to young gangster, then gangster. And from there, you could climb into the ranks of OGs and higher. Respect wasn't given, it was earned, and anybody who slipped or ignored the rules faced consequences, from fines to violence, and in some situations even death. Snitching, breaking loyalty, violating the chain of command, those were unforgivable. Taking out another Crip without authorization was also a death-worthy move. Everything needed approval, needed a green light. Their identity was wrapped in symbols, blues and grays, tattoos with 83 or ET, and an annual celebration they called Tray Day on August 3rd. Even the way they talked changed. They swapped C-Say with CC and greeted each other with phrases like, "What's moving?" Their money came from the streets. They ran drug shops across the city, heroin, crack, cocaine, weed, anything they could move. If someone outside the set tried to push product in ET territory, violence followed. The Baltimore Hilton area was the home base for the Back West crew, with major activity also happening around Lexington Terrace and Frankfurt Sinclair. What made them even more dangerous was the way they used the internet. They weren't hiding. They posted guns, threats, videos, and declarations of territory right on Instagram and YouTube. It was a mix of intimidation, advertisement, and internal status building. Being loud made them look powerful, and that reputation fed their influence. Their crimes covered everything: murder, assaults, robberies, drug trafficking, witness intimidation, and retaliation. Violence wasn't random, it was strategic. Members earned rank by carrying out missions the leadership ordered, especially the violent ones. It was all about proving loyalty to the set. One of the biggest figures in Baltimore's Back West ETG Crips was Trayvon Hall, known as Tru or G-Tru. He was recognized as a gangster, a mid-level leader with real authority. Hall grew up around West Baltimore and North Hilton, an area already known for violence. In 2013, he flew to California to meet with original Crip leaders. He wanted the official blessing to establish Baltimore's own branch. He claimed he got approval from both LA and a Crips leader in New York, giving him legitimacy in the eyes of the members. Hall made it clear what the ETG Crips were about in Baltimore. In one message, he explained that the streets learned quickly that messing with 8 Tray meant consequences, deadly ones. Their whole reputation was built on that message. Disrespect them, and they'd bring real violence. From May to November of 2016, G-Tru and a handful of ETG members were locked in on one mission: take out their rivals, the Black Guerrilla family. This wasn't petty street drama. This was a full-on plan to kill, rooted in a turf war over the drug trade in Lexington Terrace. The money was heavy in that area, and both crews wanted control. When the BGF started pushing their own operation, ETG saw it as straight-up disrespect, and the tension exploded. To understand why the BGF was such a serious opponent, you have to know where they came from. They weren't just some neighborhood gang. They were built inside the California prison system back in 1966 by George Jackson, a former Black Panther. Jackson was a huge figure, famous for his book Soledad Brother, but the legacy around him was dark. Former convict turned author Edward Bunker recalled seeing Jackson and a pack of others stabbing white inmates just for being white. That kind of violence stamped the BGF early, and over time, they shifted from political ideology into drug power, just like so many other prison-based gangs. In Maryland, the BGF became a major force behind bars. Joining them gave inmates a boost, status, protection, influence, and access. They also aligned with the Crips and other black sets on the inside, forming a racial bloc against groups like the Mexican Mafia and Aryan Brotherhood. But in Maryland specifically, the spark came from one man, Eric Brown. When Brown was locked up in the Metropolitan Transition Center in the late 2000s, he helped create the Black Book, the gang's manifesto. As it spread through the system, membership exploded, and Brown became powerful enough to run operations right from his cell. According to a prisoner named B. Moore, Brown is the one who truly birthed the BGF in the Maryland system. He corrupted officers, moved drugs, set up assaults, everything. He used smuggled phones to run the show and even had officers bringing him Crab Imperial and Grey Goose. That run ended in 2009 when he and about 24 others were indicted, but even after he went to federal prison, the BGF didn't slow down. A new leader named White took over and the machine kept turning. Inside Maryland's prisons, the BGF was recruiting heavily. New inmates were pressured into becoming couriers or forced to pay monthly fees. If they refused, violence, no exceptions. And correctional officers weren't safe from the gang's influence either. The officers and inmates were often from the same neighborhoods, and power has always been attractive. B. Moore said it bluntly, the men held power, and the homegirls, officers included, were drawn to it. The numbers backed it up. At the Baltimore City Detention Center, nearly 7% of inmates reported sexual contact with officers, way above the national average. And for the BGF, sex wasn't just pleasure, it was leverage. They used relationships with female officers to lock in loyalty. Once that loyalty was secured, those officers became their mules, smuggling in heroin, ecstasy, weed, tobacco, and cell phones using hidden compartments in shoes and other items. Some reports suggested that more than half of the 650 officers were involved in contraband smuggling. Prison officials tried to deny it, but court documents confirmed the corruption ran deep. People joined the BGF for many reasons. Some were drawn to the gang's revolutionary image. Others liked the idea of being part of something powerful, especially coming from communities where hope was limited. The myth of rebellion and the allure of danger were intoxicating for many who felt trapped by poverty and circumstance. But the truth was way uglier than anyone on the outside realized. With crooked officers everywhere and contraband moving like it had its own highway, Maryland's prison system turned into the perfect breeding ground for the BGF. And if you ask people in Baltimore, they'll tell you straight up, the BGF runs the Maryland system, period. In fact, some will even argue that the Baltimore branch has grown so powerful, it might actually outweigh the original California chapter. Now, on May 18th, 2016, G-Tru set the tone for his whole crew, Darren Hickman, Marcus Williams, and Keith Pinson. He told them straight up that joining ETG wasn't just about claiming the set, it came with a deadly requirement. New members had to bash a J, meaning they had to kill a BGF member. Hall made it clear that this was the standard going forward, and everybody in the circle understood exactly what that meant. With the rule laid out, Hall asked for pictures of potential BGF targets. Hickman and Williams didn't waste time. They sent photos of 3 men, Albert Pittman, Shyheim Brown, and a third-person authorities referred to only as Victim 4. Later that day, Hickman checked in again, saying he had eyes on one of the targets posted outside, leaning on a car. Hall pushed them harder, pointing out that Pinson had already tried to put in work the night before and reminding everyone that they needed to send a message so the BGF wouldn't get too comfortable. Hall wanted to maximize their chances. He asked Williams if there was a way to run up behind the Lexington Terrace basketball courts without being seen. Williams confirmed there was a back route he had used before. That was all Hall needed. He immediately saw it as the perfect setup for an ambush. He then asked Williams if he was willing to lead a drill that night, and Williams agreed. The next day, May 19th, Hickman spotted Pittman and his crew at Cherry Blossom Way and alerted Hall, Williams, and Pinson. Hall's frustration boiled over. He demanded to know why nobody had fired yet. Hickman explained he wasn't armed. Williams jumped in, saying he wanted the shots to count and didn't want to waste ammunition. Hickman made it clear he was hunting daily for the right moment, and Hall agreed that the goal wasn't random gunfire, it was to kill. Later that same day, the strategy deepened. Hall told Hickman to reach out to someone who could help set Pittman up. Hickman got the answer they wanted. Their contact would line Pittman up, but only if the crew guaranteed they would finish the job. By May 20th, everything intensified. Hall admitted to the crew that he was shooting at anyone he didn't recognize in Lexington Terrace, anybody who looked like they might be connected to BGF. The plan for the night was to link up and drive through the area looking for targets to kill. Hall insisted the only way to guarantee deaths was to blitz from behind. Hickman agreed and told Hall to hit him when he was ready. Hall planned to bring a gun with a 30-round magazine, and he told Hickman to go find some 9mm ammo. Then came May 22nd. Hickman updated the group saying he'd spotted BF members again at a location on Lexington Street. Hall immediately asked what they were wearing. Hickman said Pittman was in a blue jacket and had just moved toward Vine Street. Every detail mattered. They were hunting. A few weeks later, on June 12th, Hall spoke to someone about an upcoming ETG initiation, explaining that a new recruit was about to be jumped in by Williams, Hickman, and Alvin Johnson. Less than 2 weeks after that, on June 23rd, those same three tried to kill Pittman and Shyheim Brown in the 800 block of West Lexington. But the hit went wrong. 2 innocent bystanders were shot instead. 2 days later, on June 25th, Devin Powell called Hall from jail. The call was recorded. Powell asked if ETG was still applying pressure on BGF members, and Hall confirmed they were. He said Hickman had hit the gas recently, referring to the shooting that hit the 2 bystanders, and that Johnson had been right there with him. Powell said that if he weren't locked up, he'd be out there doing the same thing. The final piece of the story unfolded on July 18th, 2016. After months of planning, failed attempts, and nonstop talk about taking out BGF members, Hall found Pittman on Midline Road and shot him to death. It was the exact target they had been chasing since May. And right after pulling the trigger, Hall sent a 2-word message to his associate, checkmate. By November 1st, Hall was back again, venting to a fellow EGT member about their beef with the BGF members they called the Monkeys. One of Hall's own guys, known, had just been locked up, but Hall wasn't shaken. He said he would hold down his lil homies and brushed off the BGF presence in the area, saying there were only 3 of them left and they were clowns anyway. To drive his point home, he sent a picture of 2 BGF members, Shyheim Brown and another person, calling them the lil monkeys left from their circle. Then the EGT member asked the question that shifted everything. We going 47, yo. That was Crip code for murder. Hall didn't hesitate. He confirmed it. They were about to clean them up. 10 days later, on November 11th, 2016, Hall followed through. He pulled up on the 800 block of West Lexington Street, stepped out, and opened fire on the same BGF members he'd been talking about. The ambush left Shyheim Brown dead and wounded 2 other people. When it was time to dip, Donald Foster came through with the black Honda Accord as the getaway ride. And Hall, man, he didn't hide, didn't lay low, didn't even pretend to be shaken after the shooting. He celebrated. He texted his co-conspirator, bragging about how he just bashed the monkeys, laughing like he was untouchable and saying nobody thought he'd be back on the street so fast. He even sent over a news headline about the shooting like it was some kind of trophy. Triple shooting in Poppleton, claims 1 life, wounds 2 others. But the deeper Hall got into this life, the bigger the target on his back became. From July 2017 through July 2019, things between Hall, his ETG Crips crew, and the Abington Avenue drug organization went from tension to full-blown warfare. The ETG Crips had muscled their way into Abington's territory, and Hall was the one steering the whole operation. He pushed his people to use force. No sugarcoating it anytime someone tried to test their new boundaries. It was all about sending a loud message without ever raising their voice. This turf belonged to them now. That pressure hit a deadly peak on July 6, 2018. Hall pulled up on the unit block of Abington Avenue, letting shots fly at a group of rivals just shooting dice outside. Stephen Bo McKnight was killed on the spot, and another man, victim 18, was wounded. The gun Hall used wasn't random either. It was the same 9mm he'd used the summer before to take out another Abington Avenue member, Theron McClary. And almost like he wanted credit for it, the very next day he sent Ronnie Finney an Instagram link to a news story about the shooting. On top of that, he posted a photo of Mitch Finney throwing up ETG signs with the caption, "Move in silence, only speak when it's time to say checkmate." By April 13th, 2019, Hall was still turning up the heat. The ETG Crips targeted someone investigators referred to as Victim 15, and they even brought along a brand new recruit to help. This rookie was behind the wheel while the others were hanging out the windows shooting a 9mm and a .45. Victim 15 survived, taking a bullet to the shoulder. Within an hour, Marcus Williams sent Hall a screenshot of a news alert about the shooting, almost like a status update. The next day, Hall talked in code with his guy, Keith Pinson. They went over what happened and confirmed the new recruit really was involved. Hall wasn't exactly impressed, calling him shaky, driving goofy, and asking too many questions about the police, but he still believed the kid would be good in time. Before the day was over, Hall officially welcomed the recruit into the ETG family and schooled him on the gang's history. He broke down the different sides like the Back West or B-Dub that he repped, and explained that while they had separate blocks, they all fell under the same ETG umbrella going back to 1975. On May 19, 2019, another violent moment dropped into the timeline. Around 8:11 p.m., police responded to a shooting on Greencrest Road. Joseph Williams had been hit several times in the lower body but survived. 4 9mm shell casings were recovered, small clues but important ones. Then came June 26, 2019. Devin Smuppy Powell was picked up in Baltimore County on a separate handgun charge. When police ran his firearm through Nibbin, the digital fingerprint system, for bullets, they hit a match. The 9mm SIG Sauer taken from Powell linked directly to those shell casings from the Joseph Williams shooting. A firearms expert confirmed it under the microscope. Same gun, no doubt. While investigators were digging through ballistics, they also pulled video from a home on the 4,900 block of Greencrest. That footage, mixed with Hall's own social media trail, is what locked everything together. On the same day Williams was shot, Hall posted a picture on Instagram. In the photo, he's standing with Powell and others, all throwing Crip signs. The caption said, "Third War," something detectives recognized immediately as a nod to ETG culture. In the photo, both Hall and Powell were wearing standout outfits. Hall in a white shirt with black, yellow, and green designs, Powell in a gray shirt with unique blue markings. Those exact outfits showed up on the security camera footage. The video captured the two of them walking through the alley behind Greencrest, not long before the shooting. Minutes before the gunfire, a red SUV rolled through the alley. Investigators noticed it looked just like Hall's red Mitsubishi SUV. Then came the moment that changed everything. Joseph Williams walked into the alley. Seconds later, Powell sprinted up from behind and fired multiple shots into him. Even after Williams fell, Powell kept shooting before running off in the direction of that red SUV. A camera in the front of the house then caught the same SUV driving away with no sign of Powell on foot, strongly suggesting he jumped right in. Finally, investigators pulled digital data straight from Hall's iPhone, and that gave them a clean, minute-by-minute timeline. His movements, his messages, even his social media posts lining up perfectly with the violence that went down. But here's the thing, the FBI didn't just stumble onto Hall out of nowhere. He was already on their radar because they were tracking something much bigger, a violent Crip set ripping through Baltimore, the 8 Tray Gangster Crips. These guys were tied to shootings, murders, major drug trafficking, and a whole lot of firepower moving through the city. As investigators dug deeper, multiple confidential sources kept pointing to the same name. And when they checked those claims against the very public trail Hall was leaving on social media, everything lined up. To them, G-Tru looked like the man calling the shots for the ETG set operating around Baltimore Street and Hilton Avenue. Things really started to heat up in June 2019. detectives found an Instagram account under the name la_cabra_83, and the profile picture was literally Hall's face. The bio threw out his alias Tru, and the feed, it was filled with photos and videos of him, many of them clearly taken on his own phone. Between February 2018 and July 2019, he was all over that page, posting himself throwing up Crip sets, talking violence, talking drugs, and openly claiming affiliation. On February 20th, 2019, Hall posted a picture and went on a long rant about who he was in Baltimore, how anybody from the Hilton area or the city jail knew his name. He bragged about his reputation, about war stories, about never losing, about moving like a vet when things got hot. He painted himself as a figure people respected or feared, someone who controlled the temperature when tension in the streets rose. Then came another post on March 14th. Hall dropped multiple pictures and talked about K Street, a nickname for Cauchet Street, which sits right near the territory ETG claims. He reminisced on his first time selling a pack, using street slang for drugs, and then he mentioned the advice he got early on. Before you buy shoes, buy a tool, meaning a gun. He said he'd been strapped ever since that day. In one of the photos, the guy standing next to him had a cartoon rat slapped over his face. In gang culture, that's not a joke. That's a public accusation, calling somebody a snitch. The post kept coming. On May 19th, 2019, he uploaded a picture with a group of people, including Powell. You could see multiple Crip hand signs, blue bandanas, the whole thing screaming affiliation. Hall captioned it "Third War." Another user chimed in with references to ETG. A few weeks later, on June 9th, Hall posted another photo with Powell. The caption read 83GC, a direct nod to 8 Tray Gangster Crips. Powell was throwing Crip signs again, dressed in blue head to toe. That's when investigators really locked in. On June 14th, they got a warrant to dig into the LA_Cabra_83 Instagram account. Instagram's return confirmed the phone number tied to the account 410-493-9892. A subpoena to Sprint revealed the number was under a John Doe account in Essex. Detectives ran that number through Maryland jail call records, and when they listened to recordings involving that number, the voice matched the voice in Hall's own Instagram videos. That was all they needed. Confirmation that the account and the phone were his. Sprint also revealed something else. On May 20th, the day after Williams was shot, that original number was canceled. But under the same account, a new number got activated immediately. When they pulled the call logs from that second number, it was talking to the same people the old number had been calling. So the pattern was obvious. Hall used the first number before May 20th, then quietly switched to the new one right after. Then came the moment that pulled all the threads tight. On July 18th, investigators were scrolling through Hall's public Instagram feed and spotted a video from July 14th. In it, Hall was shooting a handgun inside an indoor gun range, but the caption was the part that shouted louder than the gunfire. "On Mitch, I never missed the target." Mitch referred to Maurice Finney, a close ally killed in 2017 during a turf war with a rival crew over a Sunoco station near Baltimore and Hilton. Hall was wearing a white shirt with the words "On Mitch" across the back in red dripping letters like blood. The whole post screamed vengeance. He even made a separate promise online saying he was going to tear things up for Finney every chance he got, while another user hyped him up, clowning their rivals for not knowing how to shoot. All those posts, all that imagery, all that boasting, it wasn't just flexing, it was evidence. Evidence that showed how Hall saw himself, how he moved, and what world he belonged to. And every piece of it pulled investigators deeper into the reality that they were dealing with someone deeply rooted in the gang's violence, influence, and retaliation culture. On July 24th, 2019, the feds finally made their move. A grand jury in the District of Maryland dropped an indictment on Hall, hitting him with a classic federal landmine, being a convicted felon caught with a gun and ammo. Anybody from the streets knows that alone can bury you. Judge J. Mark Coulson stamped the arrest warrant the same day, and from that moment on, Hall wasn't just on the radar, he was on the menu. 6 days later, on July 30th, things got even heavier. Judge Stephanie Gallagher approved a whole set of search warrants. The team got the green light to hit Hall's house at 1427 Hadwick Drive out in Essex, Maryland, sweep through that red Mitsubishi SUV he stayed driving around, and crack open his Apple iPhone tied to his number. By July 31st, the FBI and the task force were done watching. They slid in on Hadwick Drive, grabbed Hall right outside 1437, and executed those warrants like clockwork. Inside the red Mitsubishi, they found exactly what they were hoping for: a .40 caliber Smith and Wesson M&P pistol, serial number HLA 8409, a real working hand cannon. Then they cracked open the digital side. In August 2019, investigators worked their way into his iPhone. The phone confirmed the recent number he was using and showed it had previously been tied to one he was using before. But the real gold was in the text threads, messages that spelled out violent conspiracies tied to the Crips, clear as day. And one contact stood out: Smuppy G, real name Devin Powell. The feds found pictures of him and Hall posted up together, both of them throwing up Crip signs like they were taking yearbook photos for the set. Then comes May 26, 2019, the day their own text messages basically snitched on them. Powell and Hall were going back and forth, negotiating what every street dude already knows too well: a gun-for-gun trade. Hall was pushing hard to swap his 9mm Sig Sauer SP 2022 for Powell's .40, but Powell clowned Hall's 9mm, calling it lemon juice, a broken, unreliable piece. Hall tried to save face, saying it should be good now and blaming the earlier malfunction on two things: either the gun needed cleaning or Powell just didn't know how to handle it. Hall even tried convincing him by saying the gun fired 7 shots before it jammed that time, like that was something to brag about. Powell wasn't impressed. He told Hall his own .40 was his favorite Bippy, but he would see if his lure man wanted to trade instead. Hall asked what kind of gun the lure man had, and Powell dropped the bomb: a .40 caliber that was dirty. And in the streets, dirty means one thing: the gun already caught a body or was used in a shooting. That's when the whole conversation stopped being casual and started sounding like evidence. Then came the video. Hall sent Powell a clip of him breaking down a pistol. Agents zoomed in and matched it. It was the same 9mm Sig Sauer SP 2022. And here's the kicker: that was the exact same gun recovered from Powell later on June 26, 2019. Even worse, it's the same weapon used to try to kill Joseph Williams on May 19, 2019. The feds even put them side by side in Exhibit 3, the phone video gun and the attempted murder gun, same piece. Fast forward to October 2020, a federal grand jury came down hard, indicting 10 alleged members of the 8 Tray Gangsta Crips. FBI Special Agent in Charge Jennifer Boone didn't sugarcoat it. She said these men used violence like a business card, leaving fear stamped all over Baltimore neighborhoods. She made it clear law enforcement wasn't letting them terrorize communities like Lexington Terrace or the Baltimore Hilton area anymore. The indictment spelled out what prosecutors believed these subsets were doing: running drug operations on specific turf. Corners like West Baltimore and South Hilton, West Lexington, and North Fremont, Frankfort, and Sinclair weren't just street blocks. They were business zones for the gang, and this wasn't some new hustle either. Prosecutors said the racketeering conspiracy stretched back to at least 2008. Murder, robbery, drug trafficking, witness tampering, everything under the RICO umbrella. Hall, the leader of the ETG Crips in Baltimore, eventually pleaded guilty. On December 7th, 2022, he got slammed with 454 months. That's almost 38 years in federal prison, plus 5 years of supervised release when he gets out. Smuppy caught 235 months, almost 20 years behind bars, plus 5 years of supervised release. Marcus Williams, Gangsta C, got 87 months. And Ridgely Shipley, crazy, walked away with 184 months for racketeering and brandishing a firearm during a violent crime. All of it together painted a crystal clear picture. This wasn't random street drama. It was a long, deep, organized federal takedown of a gang that had been shaking Baltimore for over a decade.